Welcome into a Thursday night quasi-emergency pod. I don't know really what you want to call it, but it is a second of 3 episodes because I think I owe Patreons another episode tomorrow. So I'm going to be very busy. I'm going to be doing a lot of podcasting, but it is just John here on the RFK Refugees front. But I've got some guests. This is our first 4-guest, 4-panel RFK Refugees podcast. I have no idea if the technology will hold. I don't know if I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to go. But I wanted to go around the panel here, have everyone introduce themselves, and then get right into what I think is pretty interesting. It's interesting times here in the last 48, 72 hours here in DC United land. Angus, why don't you say, for those of you who don't know the people on this group, say who you are and sort of the group that you're representing in this conversation.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Angus long-time caller, first-time guest. I am the president and a founding member of Buzzard Point Social, the newest DC United supporters group, along with supporting various other professional teams in the Washington, D.C. area on the scene. And I'll let everybody else introduce himself now.
Elle, you want to go?
Of course. So, hi, I'm Elle, Cayabyab, Gitlin. I am a member of both Buzzard Point Social and Rose Room Collective. I am also not just a fan of DC United, but of just about every other sports team around here in the area, except for the commies, for reasons that are probably pretty well known to everybody who is a DC sports fan.
I am Douglas Reyes Ceron. I am a co-founder of Rose Room Collective. And yeah, we're out here supporting DC United and the Spirit. That's how we figure to find ourselves at. We're all about amplifying Black and brown voices, non-white voices out here in these scenes.
I'm going to put all the links to join in the show notes for this. I know Angus previously mentioned, please don't pay us any money yet. We're not ready.
No,
but
we are
do
not.
sign up. Do sign up. I think everyone should do that. I think there's these are groups that are actually really getting involved, getting their hands dirty, and we'll jump right into that. So if you have been paying any attention to social media in the last week, you'll know that there has been a bit of a conversation around the trip to Saudi Arabia, the preseason trip for DC United. It was discussed at the time on this show and everywhere else in the universe that this was a problematic decision. There was very little positive outcomes that could come from this. It's all negative. There was no disclosure about what the thought process was behind it. All the reporting was secondhand, usually through Steve Goff, saying that this is intended to be a long-term partnership. This is just the first step of many. We want to have these teams come over. We want to go back next season. And I think overall the fan base, I don't want to say universal, but nearly universal, the fan base said, this is not for us. We don't like this. There's a number of reasons we don't like this, but this just does not feel in line with what we want this team to be, what we've been told it is, what it's been in the past. And there was sort of an idea of what can we do about it. It was already done. I think a lot of people were choosing to not engage with team content. You know, these little things that you try to like, I'm going to show you guys that I'm not a fan of this by talking about it on podcasts, by being online about it. But there was no organized action as of yet of saying, what do the fans really think about this, particularly the supporters who go above and beyond, basically are unpaid employees of supporting the fans, supporting the team. They're doing TIFO, they're doing tailgates, they're doing flags, they're doing all the things that provide the atmosphere that sells the product, both at the league level, but even locally. And there was nothing sort of out and about on the scene about that until a group of nearly all, and we'll get to that, it became all at a certain point, but almost all of the groups that are in the Chico stand came together, put out a statement saying, this is not what we stand for. This is not what we were told by our GM and our coach just very recently, last week, what this team is going to be about. As a result, we are going to be quiet in the stands for 4 games. That is commensurate with the 4 games you played in Saudi Arabia. That's how we feel. That's what we're going to do. And then the Screaming Eagles came out, I think, a day or 2 later with a similar statement, basically saying on their own that they are broadly supportive of the stand that the whole group is taking. There's going to be money donated to causes, and they publicly asked for a meeting with the team to discuss these concerns and other thoughts forward. Fast forward to yesterday, that meeting actually happened. So the reason I have these 3 folks on the call is because they were all there. So let's get right into it. Sort of what was the How did you heard about the meeting? Was that just yesterday? I think you guys got like 24 hours notice, basically. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way I found out, I coach rowing for Gonzaga College High School, and we're out of Anacostia. And so I was biking from the Anacostia Community Boathouse to L'Enfant Plaza to hop a train home. And I get a call from Nelson. He's the supporters relations guy at DC United. Out of the blue, he cold called me, and I'm like, I got to pick this up. And the reason I did is because I want to clarify one detail real quick, and then that helps lend into the story. So just so we're clear here, it's not like we collectively released a statement and then Screaming Eagles responded to that statement with a statement of their own. The entire process, we have included all of the groups. The main difference being that Screaming Eagles differed on our decision to go silent for a fair reason, and I respect their decision. But that's actually my fault because I was coordinating all of the groups together to make sure that we put the statement out on time and coordinate it. And the one thing that got lost in the shuffle from me this weekend was letting Screaming Eagles know that we were going to post at noon on Monday. That's why they were a day late. I'll own that. That's on me. But after that, I was in constant conversation with Jimmy, and Jimmy got a text or a call. Jimmy is the president of Screaming Eagles. He got a text or a call from someone high up in the league and called me afterward and said, "Do you guys have a meeting with ownership tonight?" And I said, "No. Do you?" And he goes, "No, but somebody said, I hear you're meeting with ownership tonight." And so when Nelson called me 2 hours later, I was like, there's something in this. Gives me a cold call, says tomorrow, 5:30, that's your chance. One person to two people from the group. They'll hold on. Doug, can you fill it in?
Dog break.
Sure. I can take up the baton. It's very similar to how Angus was going. I got a cold call from Nelson sometime Tuesday evening. I do a walk, takes a couple hours around afternoon, 5 o'clock ish. And during it, I just got a random call from him saying, okay, meeting with ownership 5:30, short notice. And I thought, you know what? Okay, great. Let's do it. And I'm was able to loop in a friend of mine who from the Rose Room scene who normally is not really affiliated with any DC United stuff, but this was of major interest to her. So we brought her along with as well.
What were your expectations going to this meeting? Obviously, you didn't have a lot of time to plan for it. We're sort of trying to game plan publicly sort of how you were going to approach what was somewhat of a surprise meeting with, an owner that has been, I would say, up and down as far as his level of engagement with fans. There have been episodic times where he's wanted to know what's going on in the supporters groups. I think of the time where he was approached in was that 2018? When the stadium opened, was that 2017? The years are blending to me. Whatever the first season was in Audi Field, and was sort of approached saying, "There's this thing going on. It shouldn't be happening, and we need it fixed." And then he put a phone call and actually engaged on what that was. So he's not there all the time. He's there sometimes. He's here now. Attention has been brought. The statement that was made was obviously heard both in the league because they found out about it first. So there was obviously some engagement, like you need to do some damage control here locally, and then here. What were your expectations going to that meeting? Elle, I think we were talking before we recorded. What were your expectations going in about what to expect, either from an outcome or just sort of what this was going to be like?
So sports washing is now, let's face it, it's a known playbook, right? I think anybody who is a sports fan, and it goes beyond football, right? It actually encompasses leagues, it encompasses the globe, has had some level of sports washing or that level of influence in their sport, right? If you are a fan and you really care, you know this. And unfortunately, anyone who has made the deal, right? They say, yep, let's go ahead. We will partner with you. We will lend our credence to your efforts. Everyone knows. No one has ever publicly backed down. Look for it. That was one of the things I was doing, was figuring out if anybody who had ever taken money from, say, Qatar or Dubai, right? The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have any sports teams or leagues gone and publicly apologized for it. No one has. I did not expect DC United to break that trend, unfortunately.
They'll apologize for doing Flow Sports, but they will not apologize for taking the team to Saudi Arabia. That's where they draw the line. That's just how that goes. So how did the conversation start? Was there obviously? I'm just very interested in the dynamic. Obviously, it's a very few number of people in the meeting by necessity, but what was how did it start? What was the first sort of talking point that you guys encountered?
I think in terms of I think for me, I was expecting Levian to give some sort of speech, but he kind of only gave us a couple of sentences and wanted to open the forum to us on the floor and toss whatever questions we had in mind to him, which was not quite what I expected going in. And so there was a bit of a pause and like, all right, who's going to be the first one to cast the first stone, the first question? We eventually did get that going, and it really went on from there.
Did he give the impression that he understood why this action was being taken? I don't imagine he legitimized it and said, I would also do this or anything like that. But did you get the idea that he understood why this meeting was taking place and why fans were having a problem with it, or not really?
I definitely think that, and so I think in the moment I thought less of it, and then a couple of the other Buzzard Point board members read my notes and all of that, and they came to the conclusion, because it started off, he didn't seem apologetic for it at all, and I didn't expect him to be. I don't think any of us here expected him to be apologetic by any means. But I believe the way that Don, some of you know Don Rankin, brought it up. He was like, he started off saying he wasn't sorry, and that blah 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 blah. But by the end, he was saying things like, "I just don't know how to feel about this anymore." So I think we got to him a little bit, but I don't think that he necessarily understands the full consequences of his actions for going there in the first place, and what that now forever ties this team to.
I think one of the other things that you guys really wanted to make sure to get an understanding of was the duration of this partnership. And is this going to be, as rumored, a multi-year, a situation where teams are coming and playing at Audi Field? Did you walk away with an impression on that?
It's fascinating. I can't tell how much of this they were very deliberate, in wording out that there were no plans right now, meaning just right now. That was very precise language that they used. That doesn't stop them from having casual conversations with various parties that could be interested, and there didn't have to be anything put pen to paper yet. They could easily be having those kinds of conversations right now, whether or not, say in a month or two, we find out, we will host the Saudi team in the future, which was something they tossed out in front of us too. They tossed up the hypothetical of what if we host one of the teams they played in the preseason, Al Ettifaq, as a hypothetical. But part of me, and I think that everybody in the room was saying the same thing, we were all kind of thinking, oh no, this is probably what they want to do.
To provide a little bit of
maybe now trying to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah, to provide a little bit of clarification, that was brought up because someone in the meeting said, well, because the way it was phrased, the whole way that Jason tried to phrase this was that they were on this diplomatic mission. And when he was in high school, he went to the Soviet Union because he was a good basketball player, and he was able to tear down the Berlin Wall, or along the sorts of that.
Sure.
And so he wants to do the same thing with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which was great in premise, but we never did the steps to show that that's what we were trying to do. I asked about that. But to bring it back, one of the people in the group said, well, maybe if you had just started with inviting teams here so they could see how we do things here, and then maybe there's a cultural exchange down the future, then it would have worked. To which he immediately jumped on and said, oh, you guys would be okay with having teams here? Without skipping a beat, to which all of the round table, and I believe myself most importantly, said, no, that ship has sailed. You cannot do that from now on, because the way it appears and the optic appears is that it's, I believe, Elle, you said this yourself, it's quid pro quo at that point. So not to speak over you, Doug, I apologize. I wanted to get that and make that totally clear. That he was very deliberate in, you want teams here? Let's do that. We could do that. We could really do that. And we were like, no, not in the slightest.
There's 2 bits I'll add to that. There was a very quick reaction when that came up, so that was noticeable to us in terms of the body language. The other element of what Angus mentioned, Levian mentioned a story about how he went to the Soviet Union in his youth on some sports trip that he claims to have had a good time, which then led to the transition of him having a good time in Saudi Arabia, meeting the people that he met. He mentioned, I had a great time and all that stuff. And I had to say to him very directly, this is because you are a straight white man, and also a straight white man with money. Of course you're going to have a great time out there. And I said, there are people in this room, in the physical room and there are people in this chat right now, there are people that are going to watch this that we are not going to have a good experience like he had. It will be worse for us if we were to try to do that.
He has Saudi friends, so it's all okay really in the end of it. I think the one thing that, reading the notes and sort of hearing the conversation about, this was actually a humanitarian mission. We're not going to just go to cities or countries that we politically agree with, I think was another thing that might have been said. You lose a little credibility when you take the money, I think. You lose the ability to be a messenger of truth. You lose a little bit of that authenticity when you're doing tourism bits in the historic part of the city and doing Instagram stories about it. They weren't necessarily doing paid partnership with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on your post, but it's quite obvious sort of what the idea is. You're having fun. You're in a nice hotel. You're showing all these. See, it's great here. You should come visit. We're not directly saying that, but we're saying that. I feel like I think the money part is important here, and I want to know if that was sort of how much that was brought up, because everyone, the disingenuous or the cynical take, and maybe the right take, is to say this team, when shown a whole bunch of commas, they're going to take the deal. They took it with Flow Sports. They took it with the crypto sponsorship that they had to get out of early because it wasn't working out. They took it with this. This team is not funded to the point where they can say no to anything, or they can go the other direction. How did he phrase the team's need of the money that came with this from the ethical decision making, the thought process that he was having? Did that come up?
Well, I will say that the first time I did speak up, right, and the meeting had probably been going on for a good 15-20 minutes after he'd gone and explained this. No money exchanged hands. And then it changed to, well, we paid for some expenses. All right. And I asked him point blank, I said, listen, you sold us cheap. That's how it feels as a fan of DC United, right? That my fandom, right, for the team is you value it that low, that you sold it for that cheap. And Jason jumped on that. He immediately said, well, what if they'd said 10 million? What if they'd said 100 million? And to go back to what Angus was saying, right? It was a very disingenuous response, but I think anyone who's read the notes, who's listened to the audio, for those of us who are present, recognize that everything Jason said was straight out of the media guide, right? He was not going to deviate from the script. He was very well prepped. Now, to Douglas's point, there were times where he was flustered because, hey, this is his first time coming up against real live opposition to his choice, to this choice, right? But he did not waver. He knew what he had to say, and he said it.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, he wasn't being... I don't know if he was being 100% truthful. I don't know how it lined up. Obviously, none of us know how it lined up in reality. But he was very adamant that no money had exchanged hands. They covered some. We covered some, was a direct quote. We were not paid appearance fees, which contradicts previous reporting from Stephen Goff.
It does.
There is no plans for future engagement, which contradicts previous reporting from Stephen Goff. There are no business relations with the Saudis. There's no paid partnership. They did not buy a stake in the club. There will be no advertisement, which may or may not also contradict reporting from Stephen Goff. There is a whole article for those of you who are weird as to where I'm coming up with that, where Goff wrote about outlining the entire trip to Saudi Arabia, where he does mention that they would be being paid appearance fees, which he denied in the interview in our meeting yesterday, that it was fully covered by the Saudis, which he denied in our meeting yesterday, and that there would be space to grow this partnership, which he denied in our meeting yesterday. Again, I can only take him for what he said, and I can only make the connections for what I can, but as with so many parts of this club over the past 3-4 years I've been dealing with them personally, there has been a lot of talking, and it's time to see action in that. Now, if we truly did not take any money, fantastic. Don't think that really matters. But if there truly are no plans to operate and engage with Saudi Arabia past this point, I would love to see that. I would love to see that never happen again. He talked, and you mentioned it yourself, that he made a big deal about how we shouldn't avoid going to countries that we disagree with politically and values. And I agree with that. But that's weird to go say that and then jump to the worst one, right? It's a spectrum.
Right.
There's a political spectrum. He brought up and again, he brought this up as a deflection, and I want to make that very clear. This was him trying to deflect from Saudi Arabia and that topic. He brought up that members of the DC United front office had just touched down in Ethiopia and were organizing some sort of partnership with their national team. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, okay, cool. You scheduled this preseason, by the way, January 1st to January 10th when preseason started. That's when this got planned. I want to make that clear. He planned this in about 10 days, which is why there were so many problems with this trip in the first place. But the trip was planned very quickly. And so as a result, I'm sitting here going, okay, so trip gets planned by him. He took all the blame for this. It's his decision. And then you bring up, oh, what if we did something in this country? What if we did something in that country? And I'm sitting there going, why didn't you? Right? I'm assuming I can find something wrong with any of the governments that you're going to, and that therefore constitutes as a government that we don't align on politically. Right? I could find that in any country you decide to go to. Why'd you go to the one that disagrees with everything that we believe?
Or states in this country, even in fact. You could probably...
we were supposed to go to Florida.
Preferences.
He made it very clear.
Right.
We were supposed to have preseason in Palm Springs, Florida, up until this whole thing came about, where he talked to somebody from his trip when he went by himself in September and saw a prize fight, the Tyson Fury fight, and was like, oh, man, this is actually really fun. These facilities are really cool. And he talks about the facilities a bit in the meeting. For those of you who aren't privy to that information, he did talk about the facilities and how the facilities were so nice. And again, I had to bite my tongue here because I really wanted to throw back in his face. Well, clearly your own facilities don't matter, given the training facilities they train at every day. So why does quality of facility matter to your preseason? And now I understand Loudon's it's probably very adequate. All the people that I've talked to who work with the team have said the equipment inside is top notch and they have good stuff. But, it's the precedent they're setting. And I don't want to talk over people who should also be talking during this, but I just wanted to make it very clear. There were things said and ways to try to deflect from the conversation that didn't really add up when you look at the whole truth.
Right. And John, your original question was, of course, hey, the club sees commas and they go for it. And like I said, the fact that they went in cheap, right? To me, that says, the partnership or even the backroom discussions have not ended. And frankly, I am very concerned that this will lead into, say, a New York City Football Club situation, right? Sure, maybe he didn't take more than just travel expenses this go around. Unfortunately, I think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, the broadest takeaway I've seen in all of this is that he spoke far more kindly about Saudi Arabia as a nation than I would have ever imagined any human doing so, in a way that is going to, I think, everybody that was in that meeting, talking to Jimmy, talking to Angus, talking to Elle, I think we feel more affirmed about the protests going onward, about being on DC United's neck about this, because I don't see this going away anytime soon. And I think there's going to be efforts to continue to court that ownership into doing more things. They say that they don't have plans now, but I emphasize the word right now, as of February 22nd, when we're talking about this tonight. That could change tomorrow.
Well, you guys could always have your dinner with the Saudi Arabian ambassador and get straight on all this, which was offered, by the way,
multiple times. Multiple times.
Yeah.
But maybe Thomas Friedman says we shouldn't do it.
Oh, so to reference what Elle just mentioned, Levian also specifically cited having dinner with Thomas Friedman, the New York Times writer, who I'm going to avoid my opinions right here. I will just say he cited having dinner with him as one of the influencing reasons on why he wanted to do this trip as well.
Yeah, he was like his confirmation bias. Yeah.
Well, certainly if you go to the controversy tab on Thomas Friedman's writing style, particularly about countries on the other side of the world, I think you might find some reasons to, weight that opinion in a different way. Either way, I think that's sort of I want to talk about the thing Elle brought up, the thing that is most concerning, I think, to the long term. I think the trip was a bad idea. I think he now knows that it will not go unnoticed, that were this to happen again, the actions will be just the same, except for maybe louder and longer. I am, however, concerned about potential ownership stake. We've seen it already with Qatar and Monumental Sports. The reason sports washing and all this stuff works is because there is a large amount of capital in some of these countries due to sort of just the dynamics of how their economies are structured. They're petrostates. They're able to accumulate large amounts of money. And right now we are in a high interest rate environment. Clubs and investors and rich people are no longer taking the reckless gambles with capital that they took when it was 0%. And this club has been run in a way that they have spent more money. It is unavoidably, you can't say that doesn't happen. You can look at, since the stadium was built, you have the, asterisk next to it or not, training facility in Loudoun. You have efforts to build an MLS Next Pro franchise in Baltimore. You have more spending on the roster. It is certainly different and noticeably by a factor than it was at RFK. But the larger scheme thought about how Levian, Kaplan, and the rest of ownership look at this club is that it's not just the club, it's not just MLS. There's a broader universe in which they can find increased revenue in other ways. And Angus, I know you've talked about this before. I want to make sure I want you to check my perception on this too. The widespread fan assumption is that this is property based. The reason why this team is eighth most valued in MLS at $800 million or whatever the number is a lot to do about the land that it sits on, the land that the ownership has authoritative rights to build around said stadium, and it's about that. The way that this ownership is structured, the way that is sort of looked at, I look at, boy, I would love capital infusion if I were him. I would say I'll dilute my shares. Yo Gotti and Mark Ingram did not dilute my shares when they came in at vanity ownership. That we get, I don't know what happened there, how much money was changed in, but no dilution at all on ownership. But I would, if I'm him, I'm looking at a Saudi investment fund, the PIF, and say, hey, what would it take to get you into a shiny new team here in Washington D.C. with a brand new stadium? What are your thoughts about that in general? Angus, please too also check me on the property.
Yeah, so just to quickly check off on that. Yeah, most of the team's value does reside in their property. That's been well reported. And I know why a lot of people think that DC United is just a soccer team fronting as a real estate development. I don't truly believe in that conspiracy theory entirely. I do genuinely think that ownership does want to build a winner. I just think, and this is what's going to tie into that, ownership is naive. I think that the way that Levian came across last night was naive. I think that he totally did not understand and gauge the fallout of the team going to Saudi Arabia. I think he totally does not understand the importance politically of a team in Washington, D.C. I think that he does not understand necessarily the the consequences of starting and engaging with a firm as massive as the PIF. Not to say that he has, we don't know, because he wouldn't tell us. All he would say is that it's not, we didn't take any money and there are no future plans as of right now. But I think that one thing that he did come across of last night, and I think all of us can agree with that, is that he's naive. Granted, we as supporters have been down this road before, so we're not new. This isn't our first rodeo when it comes to being led on by someone, but it definitely feels like this is his. I think, Doug, you pointed this out last night. He's getting wined and dined hard by these guys, and I don't think he realizes why. I think he's just like, oh, I'm so happy someone's noticed me, right?
It had to be. It was pointed out in front of him in the meeting, and I still am not sure that he fully grasped it. We were just having to make the point of the reason they're probably interested in you is because you are just a couple miles away down from Capitol Hill. They see this club as an opportunity to gain some real political influence and add to their sports watching portfolio of other soccer teams and other sports industries that they're already involved in. They see this as a means of gaining some influence across the DC area, and especially with Capitol Hill over there. It felt very obvious to us. He did not, at least per his claim, did not seem to fully grasp that. I walk a line between, I can't tell how much of this is naivete, how much of this is lying through his teeth. It might be a mix of both, but there is a lot going on there in that brain of his.
I think too, the struggle is when you're an Arthur Blank or a Haslam or a group that has you're a billionaire. And these groups come to you and they say, we have a lot of money too. And you say, well, that's nice. I also have a lot of money. I'm not really super concerned about what you can do for me because I can do it all for myself. Ownership for DC United is not in that strata.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say we're mom and pop, but if you compare sort of the net worth of our ownership group, Steve Kaplan, I think, has a little bit more money. But overall, we're not those. We're not Arthur
I think
Blank.
the last time we were able to find a valuation of our owners, and I did this before pandemic numbers, so keep that in mind. If you Google the net worth of DC United's owners and do a little bit of digging, you'll find some Swansea ownership stuff. And that's where it comes from. Of our owners being worth about $600 million, which, to put into perspective, percentage-wise, I think I did this math at one point to argue as to why we don't invest as much as in Atlanta United, for example. Like the contract percentages of a entry-level homegrown deal is like the comparison, like a $100,000 contract is like the equivalent of a $500,000, $800,000 contract at Atlanta United, where their owner is worth 15 times more than our owners. And again, I think that falls into the naivety kind of thing. I kind of wish I was rich enough not to care and to not be worried about myself, right? Because that's where it comes down to. I think that he can lose focus of what he represents and who he represents by proxy. Like as Doug said, you could see the Capitol from the top of the supporter section at DC United. And, I'm sure the PIF saw Qatar buy into Monumental and saw how there was little to no backlash there because nobody cares. It's hockey. They got their own problems. And it's basketball. No one cares about the Wizards, sadly. I do too. It's just let's call a spade. When you're that shit, like
Yes.
I can go to the game on Sunday for $1. You know what I mean?
The lament of the DC sports
right.
fan.
So it's like you bring in that small percentage that's totally not financing the brand new stadium, his side of the brand new stadium. That's not going to happen anymore. Haha. And now somebody else who wants some political firepower in the DMV goes, oh, that clearly went very well for them. What about us? Why not us?
And and the thing that rattles in my mind is how many stakeholders across this region would be affected by a possible, like, my fear is that they get a stake in the club, and who knows how far that could go. That could end up with them fully owning the club for all we know down the line, which is my ultimate terror in all of this. And then the amount of stakeholders that would be impacted would be pretty tremendous across this region: supporters, staff members, people like across the DC area. Hell, there were some friends of mine joking in the Rose Room channels about, well, will women be allowed to go to DC United games? Will the Spirit be allowed to play at Audi after this? How do the Saudis handle a female owner? Stuff like that was tossed around as theoretical, but it's the kind of shit you kind of have to think about in all of this, like that far down the line.
For sure. I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your guys' time. I really do appreciate you taking the time out on a Thursday night to talk about this. I want to just focus on one sort of thing that makes this different than the Wizards and makes it different than the Caps and makes it different. The cool thing, I think, from our standpoint, and the reason why I do a podcast about this, the reason why you all do what you do, is that this club has a community base around it. It's not just a thing that you watch and go to and then go do something else. There's a thing about soccer and about this club in particular in the region where it is a part of your identity. It's a part of the way you spend your time. It's a way that you structure your friendships and sort of network. It's like the way, it's just a different experience. You're not a consumer necessarily. You feel that you are a part of it. You are not necessarily a co-equal part sometimes. Sometimes you feel less co-equal, but you're a part of it. And I think only because that dynamic exists can you get a group to coordinate amongst other groups, fans, communicate and understand how collective action is the only way that you're going to actually address and redress any of your concerns. Only soccer, only DC United here in this city could have got the owner to sit down, regardless of what he actually decided to do or said he would do or promised to do or didn't promise to do. The meeting wouldn't have happened for any other group. It would have happened, like, theoretically, I think maybe the Diamond Club members at the Nationals maybe would get to sit down with Mark Lerner if they had a problem, maybe, and at the very high end. But you guys aren't that. You are representatives of the most enthusiastic support of the club. What do you think? I just want you to react to that. How valuable is it to be a fan of DC United and have a voice that maybe other fan bases don't have, and just how different it is to be a DC United fan that's involved and cares versus any of the other concerns that we talked about?
So I am a Nats season ticket holder as well as the Spirit season ticket holder. And I can definitely tell you, and I will use the example of the Oakland A's, who, for those who are not in the know, are being shipped off to Las Vegas. And of course, the very loyal fan base do not want that to happen. But at the same time, they don't want their tax dollars going towards a very shiny new stadium, right? That the owner can pay for on his own. What was great was Oakland A's fans reaching out and Nats fans reaching out to the Oakland A's fans saying, hey, we're hosting you for 3 games. We will use our points and buy you folks tickets, right? We will pass out flyers explaining this. We will do bulk orders of sell shirts for folks to wear. And it was seeing that in baseball, which is not something that happens, if at all, right? But it was fantastic to see. And then contrasting that with what has just happened, right? Seeing how quickly the supporters groups came together, how united they were, right? And the front that we presented, right, at the meeting yesterday was very, very united. I don't think anyone who was there from a supporters group had, was different in their opinions, right? We're all on the same page.
I think that was one of the most... Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think for those of you who have been going to these meetings far longer than I have, apparently that's a surprising thing.
I was going to say, this isn't 2001.
It's very new.
This isn't where people... I remember call-outs of those meetings in the RFK days. I went to a couple in the RFK days. And there was no strategy. There was no conversation ahead of time. People would ask wildly unrelated questions. They would make the group on the whole seem unserious by those questions. And I, from the outside, looked at what all of you did and how seriously you took it. And with, organizing principles and messaging principles and figuring out who to seed the conversation with ahead of time, so that when it came out, people were talking about it already and they already were familiar with it. It is not 2001 anymore in the DC United supporter group era.
I will say this. I think that DC United made their worst enemy in that. The outreach, and I will commend the outreach that, and I think this is really funny because apart from one individual in the organization who has now apparently been given the Office Space treatment, I saw that reference on Sicko's committee, Doug. Jason has surprisingly surrounded himself with smart people, which is crazy. And those smart people are people like Danita Johnson, Allie McKay, and Troy Lassane. But most importantly for us as supporters, it's Nelson Fuentes. Now, I don't want to put him on blast because I know that he likes to stay a little bit further back. But the work that he and his team, and this is made very clear in the meeting, by extent, Danita, has been very good in mending the relationship between supporters and the front office. But most importantly, in my opinion, mending the relationship between the supporters groups internally. I think that they mistimed their trip to Saudi Arabia. If they were ever going to take one, they should have taken it 3 years ago when we all hated each other still. Yep. They decided to take it the 1 year where we had the possibility to actually come together and produce something unified on this. And we did. And I can't thank people like Doug and Elle and everyone else who was in that meeting, who I don't necessarily want to name because I don't know if they want their name to be out there or not, for coordinating and coming together on all of this. Now, with that being said, the community outreach has been fantastic from a non-supporter side of it too. I think that the educated city that is Washington, D.C. knows very well when they see some bullshit. That we all got good bullshit meters. We're when it came to this. And so the overwhelming support from the community at large has been huge. And now I want to address one part that I keep seeing is that protesting doesn't work. Being silent won't accomplish anything. It's just playing into their hands. We're not going to be silent. I think that there's a fine line that we're walking here. We will not be organizing chants, and we will not be bringing drums, and we will not be bringing banners that we usually bring to the stadium. That does not mean we will not be in the stadium handing out leaflets. We will not be creating banners against the regime. We will not be doing things to make sure that this never happens again, or at least is vocally present that we dislike what happened. We have announced 4 games of silence where we will not be doing that. And my preposition at this point is that we do our 4 games and then we get loud about it, right? It's very clear that this is not going away. Jim Enzor, one of the 202 Unique members, had a very powerful slogan attached to this from his time growing up, which was silence equals death. And I think that in this situation especially, that is relevant because being silent on this topic equals death. We will have admitted defeat if we are not vocally against the regime in this situation. And that's only possible with a community that we have developed, and that's only possible with the teamwork we have been able to do to get to this point in the first place.
I think that's well said. I wanted to make sure we had this conversation so that other people who aren't on Discord or Twitter or whatever else don't even know this meeting occurred and maybe see that the protest is happening, or maybe they get to the stadium on Saturday and they're like, "What the hell? What's going on?" And they still don't know. Which I will tell you will be 40 to 50% of the fans that are there. I remember going to a game a couple years ago, multiple years after Bill Hamid was gone, and I was sitting and someone said, "Where's Bill Hamid?" And it had been 3 years. And I was like, all right, well, see, you don't know who you're sitting next to. Everyone is not as online as you are. You have to understand that. So I think that I wanted to make sure I had all of you on so that a little bit of maybe potentially people who wouldn't otherwise hear about it understand that where this started, with the seed of how it started, and how quickly it got to the point where you're sitting in the room with the decision maker and making sure that he understands, even if it happens again, and even if whatever else, for sure, your perspective and your stance and why you feel that way is understood, and it cannot be said that it isn't. No matter what, if they do it again, they know they will be doing it against the stated wishes of all the people that were in that room, And that matters. That's important.
I think it was very impressive to see that this has probably been the most concise and I'll just say the word united effort I have seen all these supporter groups come together on. Because obviously, I think a lot of people that are even listening to the show knows that we just went over there's been some fraught history between everybody. But this was the one far and away where I've seen everybody composed, disciplined, was ready to come out with the exact questions we needed to ask Jason Levian on. And everybody stuck to the task. Nobody deviated from what we wanted to get out of that. And I think our resolve has gotten stronger since that meeting. And like I said earlier, we're going to be staying on our toes through all of this, through these protests and afterwards.
Yeah, I was going to mention that it reinvigorated a lot of people who may or may not have been kind of done with the scene in general for various reasons. But I know for a fact that this coming together has reinvigorated people. Now, I also understand that us going silent for 4 games some deem is not enough. I understand that us being in the stadium in general is being deemed not enough. And we need to be boycotting with our dollars and all of that. I will argue against that thoroughly because we have done that before in the past. We have gone fishing every year since I've been involved in this section. At one point or another, we say, we're done with this. And then we quit for a game and a half. And then we realize nothing's going to change. And we end up coming back because something or other happens. And this time around, and we noticed this, I think, started last year. Doug and I showed up to the stadium with a Casper out banner. 1. That turned into 5, and that turned into Allie McKay. At least that's how it presented to us. And that was like 3 games worth of stuff. So now, that proved to us that if there is anything that this ownership doesn't like, it's being made a fool in public. It's having their name dragged. What happened this time around? We come out with a group statement. That's awesome. That goes nowhere if it wasn't for people like Pablo Maurer and Stephen Goff reaching out for comment, 1, and 2, actually publishing stories, because that gets it into the mainstream. And then that reaches to NBC Sports Washington, and then that gets on the evening news, and then that gets on mainline channels, and then that explodes. And that wouldn't have happened without the coordination and correlation of all the groups together. And I mean that all the groups together. That's not Screaming Eagles coming out 2 days later with a statement. That's not La Banda not being a formally recognized group. That is all of the groups saying, hey, this is messed up. Let's get to it. And so by that, that's how you get change to happen with this team. That's what we've learned. Now, if they want to do that, if they want to play the game of make as much noise and we won't care, that's fine. Then we will then we'll just change. We'll pivot. We're doing what's working now, and we're happy it's working now because very clearly it's affecting change. Now it's time for them to show us that they have heard our displeasure, and it's time for them to act on that. And their actions over the next 6 months to a year will show us exactly where they stand and exactly what they understood when it came to talking with us as supporters. And we hope that for all of you out there listening, we are doing a good job in upholding your own voice in this, because we understand we are in and of itself privileged enough to have the opportunity and the floor and be in the position to talk with someone who is otherwise unattainable for 99% of your listeners. And so as a result, I hope the feedback that you all provided to us when we came out with this has been noted, and we want to hear more from you. Please do reach out, do get involved, do volunteer. That's what we need.
I wanted one final little addendum to that. You mentioned sort of that you're representing or hoping to trying to represent the voice of the supporters who are both here and not able to be here and busy and whatever else it is. There are also supporters that will not agree with this in general. Don't think that people think we're making a big deal about this and who really cares, and it's not actually a big deal. And what I'll say to that is, okay, that's fine. That is certainly your belief and something you can hold. But the noise in the stadium is an ode to you. So if you don't agree, you can't impose, you can't demand sound. You can't demand action of other people just because it would be better for you. It makes your experience better. we talked about this on Discord all the time. We talk about like you're not owed anything as a fan, as a fan who just pays his money to go to the game. You're owed to watch the game. That's it. Whatever ambiance or whatever visuals or whatever sound, that is blood, sweat, and tears and created and passion, and is done by people who choose to. And it's not just the thing you get for coming to the game. So I know that there are people who don't agree with anything about this and are mad that you guys are taking a stand and that it will be quieter than usual and there'll be no drums. Tough shit. Do your own protest, whatever that looks like on the other end of it. But I just want to call out to the fact that it's not owed, and all of the work and passion and sweat and all the stuff, the effort that you bring forward is because you want to do it, and it's for your own reasons. And it's not owed to anybody, guys. So don't get mad at them.
And if anything, silence
don't
within the stadium tells people that there's something wrong, right? Yeah. One single support the team, not the regime chant will not turn enough heads. If they go, where are the drums? And then they are like, what? And then they see a banner that says support the team, not the regime. They might connect the dots. But if we're in there handing out leaflets with our statement, if we have signs with our statement up, it's being active in the silence that is different this time than previous times. So yes, your favorite thing is not around for the first 4 games. I apologize for that. Right? If you believe that the team should be supported and the first team should be supported, we agree on that. We agree that the first team should be supported. This is not a first team issue. This is not a investment issue from a squad perspective. This is not a player acquisition issue. This is an overall ownership issue. That's what this is. And if you would like to support the team and you would like to get out there, more power to you. But I want people to understand why we have chosen to take a little bit of a break. And if you want to make a huge statement to the team, support us for these 4 games and then drive up the road to Citi Field on April 20th for the away game against NYCFC. Show the first team on the road that you supported them all these past 4 games by getting out there and showing them that you care about them and you're willing to drive that far to support them, right? That's what I would suggest doing. I would suggest supporting us for 4 games. I know it's all the way to April and late April at that. That's just how the schedule works. I'm sorry about that. It's also the day that Messi is supposedly coming. I'm sorry about that. But is there ever a better opportunity to get our message across than when you have the 2 organizations who participated in sports watching this offseason in the same building on a very special time, on a very special network, the only time DC United will be put on this pedestal all season to voice our concerns and to show our displeasure with ownership in making this decision. So if you do understand where I'm coming from and understand where my friends are coming from and want to help, please do help. We encourage you to do that. If you believe in something else, that's cool too. Let's have that discussion. I'm here for that. And if you really want to go support the team, go away to NYCFC on April 20th. Go make a bunch of noise there and bring that same energy on the 27th when we're back home. And it's time to get loud in our support for the team and against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's investment or potential investment inside of DC United.
I want to give Elle and Doug a chance to sort of final thoughts before we wrap up. A tradition of RFK Refugees is before the show saying, this is going to be like 20, 30 minutes. We got a short rundown and always going 60 minutes. So we've done that again. The chain is unbroken. Doug, tell me just what you want people to take away from this experience of the last week.
There is still a lot of work to be done. I think that this is absolutely not over, but this is probably the most unified I think I've seen this section ever be. And I have seen some people take up some bizarrely defeatist attitudes over like, oh, this is inevitable, winter's coming, whatever. I'm like, no, F that. I'm sorry, I was about to curse. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to.
Thank you. We're a PG-13 show.
I said F that, beep that. I'm not doing that. we are doing our best to say, no, we're not accepting this, standing up, getting out there, getting loud. And clearly people are catching wind of that energy. And as we have seen in soccer protests out in Germany, for example, they were protesting hard against potential private investors coming in, and they won. They successfully warded them off from changing the Bundesliga forever. And we've seen other actions in the past. We've seen what happened with the Washington Spirit over their former ownership, all of the actions around that. I say, no, F all that. We can absolutely get loud and try to make some change out here and heat everything off at the pass before this can all get worse.
What I will say is that I want to compare and contrast DC United's visit to the folks who are asking, why are you guys going to be quiet for 4 games? Jason told us in the meeting that we were there, that they went there to build bridges, right? To share our values with them. I don't believe anyone has actually seen proof of exactly what that looked like. But here's the thing. You will see that when you are in the stadium this weekend. You'll see that for the next 3 games, right? This is us answering that question of, why are you still going? Why don't you just sit this game out? Well, you know what? We're going, right? We've already paid our money, right? The team has it. It's fine. So we're going to use it, right? Because if we're going to protest, we got to be present.
Absolutely. And I think that there have been empty stadiums in Audi before, or nearly empty stadiums, and it wasn't. That's not national news. Unfortunately, that's occurred before. So your quiet presence is a lot more speaks louder than empty stands. I don't think that really would do the job anyway. And just before, again, I said before we wrap up, I want to make sure I shout out Ted, who asked a good question today in the press conference. He asked our coach, "What do you feel about this?" And he supported this measure. He understands it, and he supports people, acting in their conscience. So we got a good one, I think. And our coach, I think that's great to see. We'll see how it all boils down. But early statements on our GM and our coach, they seem to understand what the supporter culture is about, particularly here at DC United, and what needs to be done to rebuild bridges. So we can only be thankful that the question was asked and it was answered in a way that I think no one can have a problem with. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. For everyone who is just finding out about this protest now somehow, I'm sure you're very confused. Go on the internet for a little bit and you can probably get a little bit more of the background, but I think we did a good job wrapping the whole thing up in a bow. We are going to be, we have a game this Saturday. There'll be a Patreon show out tomorrow, sort of previewing the game a little bit more. For those who are able to be there, for those who are there and are quiet, do your thing. For those of you who were sitting on a couch, tweeting at Dave Johnson, trying to get the name of your podcast said on TV, which he does every single time, you will be me. But I want to thank you for listening to this show, Monday's show, tomorrow's show, and joining us again Monday Night Live on Twitch at 8:30. So with that said, thank you for listening. Elle, Doug, Angus, thanks for joining. And we'll catch you, all of you, on Monday after the game and hopefully 3 points. Vamos.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RFK Refugees Podcast. Make sure you rate and review the show wherever you download podcasts. If you want to support the show, consider joining our Patreon or subscribing to our channel on Twitch. Lastly, make sure you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Twitch, Goals.tv, Friendster, MySpace, and Tumblr. Some of those are even real. Vamos.